for joining us and happy International Women's Day. So tonight we have Jane Cooze, who's going to be talking to us from Newfoundland, and she'll be talking about surviving the pandemic as a student. And she's got lots of really good informative stuff planned for us, and we're really looking forward to having her talk. And we also had Danielle Robert this morning, who was talking about choosing to challenge her self-worth. She was our first talk today in our speaker series. And if you missed Danielle's talk, it's already live on the Facebook event page. And it's also going to be up in the next couple of days on our new YouTube channel, ILM Campaign. And so I'll introduce myself first. I'm your moderator for today. My name is Cassandra Petrella, and I'm a registered psychotherapist. I'm joining you here from Ottawa, Ontario at my counseling clinic, Senta Counseling Services. I'm a practicing psychotherapist, and I work with teens, adults, couples, and families. And so our campaign was actually founded 5 years ago on International Women's Day. So this is a very special day for the campaign because it's really given us the chance to reflect on all of the amazing people that we have met throughout the years and to really reflect on the thousands of women that we've gotten the opportunity to provide mental health education towards. We've got really great core teams in Newfoundland and Ottawa, and we've had hundreds of community people come together to really help us with our vision to provide free mental health education, whether that's in volunteering their time or in helping us fundraise and donate so that everything that we do can be free of cost to girls and women. And so that is a really kind of special moment for us. And we really had to step up to the call this year to figure out how are we going to connect? Because for us, this component of human connection has been a very big part of the work that we do. And so this was a new endeavor for us to take everything virtual. And I think one of the silver linings for us today is that we're getting to connect with more people this year in celebrating. We're taking it from local celebrations to being able to go Canada-wide. And we have events that are planned today. We have 8 in total, as far out as we have Jane joining us from Newfoundland, and we've got some more events there as well. And we're going through to Quebec, Ontario, as well as Manitoba. So we've got things happening all across Canada. And that's also really, really cool for us too. And so I think, it's really important that we come together today, especially with everything that's going on in the world, to spend some time and be present, and let's make this really good and collaborative and supportive. And so a couple notes that I want to make is to remind everyone that today is a safe space for everybody, and it's an inclusive event. We are a team of individuals who have a professional background in providing specialized mental health support, treatment, and education to teen girls and women. But it's also important for us to say that boys and men's mental health are equally important. And it's very important that they as well are a part of the conversation as we talk about creating change and equality. And so today's talk is going to focus primarily on women's mental health, but it is an inclusive event. And so we welcome you all to join us and share and comment in our chat. We also want to take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous land that our talks are being a part of today. As I was mentioning, we are being kind of canvassed all across Canada in terms of where we're hosting and also who's joining us. So I want to take that moment just to say that we acknowledge that this is land that the Indigenous individuals were on before we arrived or our families arrived here in Canada. And we really honor that land, and we come in peace as we kind of present today. And so a note as well that we'll be recording this session and we'll be making it available on our ILM Campaign Facebook page, the event page for today, and our YouTube ILM Campaign. And just in terms of anonymity or anything like that, you are able to change your name if you need to, just to give you that heads up as well in the Zoom settings. And so today we have Jane Cooze, who will be, again, talking to us, as I was mentioning, about surviving the pandemic as a student. And so this has been really, really tough on students. And it's been especially tough to be a part of this pandemic for women. And women have really been shown to now be at a great disadvantage during the pandemic, especially women who are women of color, Indigenous women who are part of the LGBTQ+ community or are disabled. They're doubly at a disadvantage. And so this is really important where we're able to really highlight and understand what's happening for women today in the state of the world, and also find ways to support them and come together. So let me talk to you a little bit more about Jane before I pass the talk over to her for the majority of our chat today. So Jane Cooze is a second-year medical student with the Faculty of Medicine at Memorial University of Newfoundland. She has been a volunteer with the I Love Me campaign since 2017, when Newfoundland and Labrador started their own chapter for undergraduate psychology and neuroscience students. Jane has been very active with the campaign, having previously held positions such as volunteer coordinator position for the Newfoundland chapter, helping train volunteers, giving workshop talks to community groups, sports teams, and more with the rest of the Newfoundland team. Prior to being a medical student, Jane received a Bachelor of Science honors degree in both behavioral neuroscience and biochemistry nutrition from Memorial University. Jane hopes to pursue a career in obstetrics and gynecology after her medical education to continue empowering women to have autonomy of their own bodies, reproductive health, and birth processes. Along with her experience with the I Love Me campaign, Jane has also worked as a resident assistant at Memorial University and has 3 years experience with the Newfoundland Sexual Assault Center supporting folks with lived experience of sexual violence. Through this, she has training in trauma-informed practice, adjustment disorders, and how to work closely with vulnerable populations. Jane is a huge advocate for equity in healthcare and intends to dedicate her career to increasing space for patients' voices and making healthcare more accessible to populations who disproportionately experience discrimination in hospital settings. Great, Jane. So we are ready for you to get started.
Oh, okay, it's working. Okay, hello everyone. So I'm just going to share my screen and get my desktop ready, and then we'll jump right into it. Okay, so I go here, and okay. Okay, so if someone or Cassandra could just pop in the chat that you can see my entire presentation and hear me clearly, that would be great. Okay, thanks, Maddie. Yeah, so as Cassandra said, my name is Jane Cooze, and I'm a second-year medical student at Memorial University. But I Love Me has been part of my life for almost 4 years now, and it's been a really big passion project for me. So, hold on. Oh no, tech difficulties. Hold on. Okay. My mouse for my computer is like really sensitive. Okay, so I Love Me has been a huge passion project for me since Shannon Bedford brought it to Newfoundland, and it stands for everything that I've always been an advocate for my entire life, as I constantly saw what it meant to be and grow up to be a woman in spaces largely preoccupied by men's voices, and having to be confident in my own voice so that it could be heard amongst this really homogenous scene that we have been seeing and slowly beginning to diversify over the years. So today I'm going to talk to you about practicing self-compassion, which is one of the things that's really gotten me through every big obstacle I've had to face in my life, including COVID-19. So the first thing I want to ask you all is, what did you have planned for your 2020? I know when we woke up on or celebrated January 1st, 2020, we all had many ideas about what the year was going to look like. For those of us in St. John's, it did not include a lockdown with Snowmageddon followed by a lockdown with COVID-19. And my 2020 looked more like going to see Taylor Swift with my best friend in Boston. Getting to practice and shadow medicine in my field. This was my first day in the OR last January before COVID struck hard here in March. Getting to see my baby nephew who lives in Calgary and spend time with him and his mom, which is my big sister. Going to see my best friend Liam, who lives in BC for his master's program. This was actually in January, celebrating my birthday with my best friends, thinking that the full year was going to look like this, and we were going to enjoy what turning 23 had to offer all of us. I thought I was going to be seeing these lovely faces, and I know some of you are here today every single day in class, you know, when I showed up, and get to be learning my skills from you and learning with you guys and from you guys. And I didn't expect to see you all through computer screens for the next year. And also Liam and I were supposed to see Billie Eilish, and all these things got refunded, and all of these things um, changed how I was going to interact with everyone I knew in my life. And I think, as many of you know, this was really shocking. And I think it should be said that we should be free to mourn the loss of what we had planned and what we were excited for and what was to come with the stress, the mood changes, the behavioral changes, and the hardships that were going to come with COVID-19 this year. So now I'm going to move on to talk about how living through a pandemic has impacted different populations in Canada. So firstly, obviously this is International Women's Day, and I want to say happy International Women's Day to everyone out there who identifies as a female and is joining this talk today to help us celebrate our women. And the United Nations posted a really great policy brief back in April of 2020, sort of outlining how women were going to be impacted and have been impacted by this pandemic. But I think one of the biggest things we've seen through COVID-19 is that it's not just how the pandemic has impacted women, it's that these trends were already apparent for women all over the world. And it got exacerbated when we got hit with COVID-19. And so here we see things such as childcare. For thousands of years, it has been expected of women to bear children and care for children. And when working families no longer had access to childcare or could afford childcare because of job loss, then they often were the people who were home with the children, while other partners or other financial supports were there to get them through this hard time. And for many women who work and dedicate part of themselves to creating this career, while it is a beautiful thing to be a childcare and to raise children, many women were mourning their plans for 2020 and their plans for their career and had to take a step back from that. Another thing is unpaid care work. So we've seen time and time again how women are expected to carry more of the emotional labor when it comes to jobs. I know myself from shadowing family medicine. I've seen so many female family physicians who talk about how women physicians see less patients. And if you're a fee-for-service physician, that means you get less of a salary due to the number of patients you're seeing. And she explained to me that this was because women often have to do mental health cases or reproductive and women's health cases, which naturally, by the nature of their content and the appointment, take longer. And male colleagues and other females and through referral services have often sent these patients to females, or patients request to have a female physician. And while this is certainly valid and very important work, something that I want to dedicate my life towards, it has shown that there's an impact in the pay that women are receiving as physicians to do this. And then when you step outside of the workplace, this unpaid care work is much more because of how we naturally gravitate towards sharing these roles with the females in our life. And when you go through a stressful period such as COVID-19, it's important to recognize when you are putting that burden on women in your life. And why are we having these conversations with female identified folks and not with male identified folks, and how that work sort of balances out. We also see compromised healthcare. There was an article out of Venezuela talking about how women's access to birth control and reproductive health has been largely impacted by COVID-19, in that we see in more developed nations, one of the biggest ways women got over that barrier and got into the workforce and being respected in the workforce was accessibility to proper reproductive health and contraceptive methods. So COVID again is really playing a role in our backtracking all the work that has been done to give women an opportunity to enter the workforce. Again, we see spikes in gender-based violence. I come from a background of supporting folks with lived experience of sexual violence and intimate partner violence. And these acts are largely gender-based, with women, non-binary, and transgendered partners disproportionately experiencing this violence. So we really do see when people are spending more time at home, when there's more stress at the home, people have lost jobs, this gender-based violence has increased and made it a really dangerous place for women relevant to this talk over the last year. And then we have to think about intersectionality. So I just want to make a disclaimer that I myself am a white cisgendered female, and I recognize that I'm no way an expert in any of these experiences. And I encourage you to do the research and learn from people of diverse backgrounds what it's like to live with the systemic barriers that they do on a day-to-day basis. But I also think that I can't be here today or ever advocating for and talking about what it is to be a woman and the barriers we face without addressing how diverse groups and people of different backgrounds do experience these barriers and struggles at a disproportionate level to other people who have the privilege of white skin tone, of being cisgendered, and etc. So, like I said, these groups have experienced disproportional amounts of gender-based violence, of, lower income status before COVID happened. And when COVID happened and people were losing jobs, these demographics, so people who are not white, women who, ooh, did my screen stop sharing? I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, let me click this again. Okay, I'm not sure what happened. Okay, can you see my screen now, folks? You can type there in the chat. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I don't know what happened. It just kind of popped away for me. People who don't have the privilege of white skin tone and have been discriminated against on the basis of skin color, people who identify as transgender or non-binary, people who are not heterosexual, or people, that's okay, Cassandra, people from many diverse backgrounds that society has ostracized and silenced in the past, feel these impacts with a greater weight. So I did some research and I looked into some populations here in Canada that have been disproportionately impacted, and our Indigenous populations popped up as a group or groups that have been disproportionately experiencing the wrath of COVID. And this largely has to do with social and health inequity. And so we see that non-communicable and infectious diseases are far more common in our Indigenous populations because of how they've been treated by our society and because of the decreased access to healthcare that they've often received, and the disconnect that exists between Westernized medicine and the traditional medicines of Indigenous persons, and a lot of times the distrust that has been built over hundreds of years of assimilation efforts. And so as a training physician, I recognize that there's a lot of distrust in the system, and many Indigenous populations may not feel safe to discuss their health with more modernized healthcare facilities, and often don't trust new technologies or testing methods or have access to these methods, and therefore the accessibility to coping with COVID has been largely impacted. I also read an article about how Canada has made a shift to return people to work and to save the economy during COVID-19. And women of color in Canada have been left behind. This is because women of color disproportionately made up the employees of sectors that were largely impacted by COVID-19. And then when Canada put forth these efforts, they put forth supporting large industries that were heavily white influenced and made lots of money to fuel our economy, and sort of these working class folks were left out of that conversation. Again, there's a privilege to be able to take sick days, to be able to stay at home. We've seen that essential workers are often paid minimum wages, such as folks who are working in grocery stores and at our corner stores, and things that people need to live comfortably. And so a lot of those jobs don't come with the benefits of being able to take sick days or being able to stay at home and do their work safely from home. Again, we talk about the social determinants of health. So people from lower social economic backgrounds, people who face discrimination for different ways they identify. These all determine how someone has access to healthcare, how they trust healthcare, and how they're believed in healthcare. Because unfortunately, many marginalized folks have their pain not believed, and have their stories not believed, and can receive lower quality care because of this. And with COVID, we've seen a huge shift to online working and working from home. And for people from lower social economic statuses, this digital environment may not be accessible. Home security may not be accessible. Where are they supposed to isolate? And the economic shocks that people making lower wages have felt during COVID have been disproportionately high. And so now I'm going to jump in to talk a bit about how students and youth were impacted. So there have been largely a lack of supports for youth throughout this time. If you, thinking from a Newfoundland perspective, if you live in rural Newfoundland, you don't have the access to a hospital near you. You don't have an access to therapists, counselors near you. Many people who do have access to these services don't have the financial means to support that, or may not have insurance that prioritizes and covers these sorts of things. And often for youth, they face a barrier of power dynamics. They don't feel empowered to talk about their mental health or to talk about the challenges that they are facing. And so we've seen that this has been a large area of struggle for youth and students over the last year. We're vastly social creatures. You know, I talked about seeing my best friends, and all of a sudden that was taken away. And, you know, how do you supplement that? How do you tell a student who's in school from 8 to 3 or from 9 to 5 that now if they want to see someone or hang out with their friends, they have to jump on a screen again? You know, how do you say that, okay, now that you've dedicated all this time in school and you need to study, well, if you want to see your friends, you can't sit in the same physical space and study with them. It's another thing that's been taken away. And with that comes vast isolation. And with isolation, we see deteriorating mental health and maladaptive coping mechanisms that youth and students often resort to, whether that be isolating themselves more, not talking to their friends, having poor nutrition, low motivation for physical activity, or even turning to substance use. For many folks, this meant moving back in with your families, or your families working from home and you guys being together 24/7. With that, you feel the stress of everyone around you. It buzzes, it's an energy. And so it's been really tough on folks who have to balance all of these emotions. And often we harbor this guilt about the emotions we're feeling when everyone around us is stressed. So who do we turn to? How do we cope with this internalization, and how do we move past it and get through a pandemic? Remember, it's not normal to live through a pandemic. So this is a little diagram I showed to identify the intersectionality of all these things that COVID has taken from us or has added on to our plates. And this is by no means an inclusive list. I could have made this bubble way bigger, but my tech skills were limiting me. So I want you to remind you that this is not inclusive, and there's many identities that create barriers for folks. Some I have previously mentioned and some I'm sure I have forgotten. So if you want to highlight any groups, I encourage you to enter them in the chat, and please provide me any feedback, because I'm always open to learning how I can be more inclusive in these talks and in my presentations. But this sort of diagram and inclusivity lens is what I want you folks to keep in mind when moving forward through this talk. So now I'm going to dig a little bit into how this pandemic and stress can impact our health, even though we may be COVID-19 negative. So this is a little diagram I found, and it's your stress response system and your body. So essentially, the human brain was made to deal with running away from predators, you know, that fight or flight response when we were all cavemen and we were trying to, every decision we made could have been life or death. And unfortunately, as we have progressed out of this and have created more safer lives and sustainable lives for ourselves, our brains didn't quite catch up. So you'll see that the responses your body gets are the same responses you would need to run away from a bear. So you get that heightened heart rate and the deep breathing, and your blood pressure increases and you're sweating and you can't focus on anything but the task at hand, or maybe you can't focus at all because you're just worried about escaping the fight. And you can notice that you're not using the bathroom regularly, and that your body systems kind of go on pause for you to be able to cope with the stress that your body's enduring. And I want you to remember that this works when we're running away from a bear. This works if you're, you know, doing a 100-meter sprint. But how does this integrate into the lives that we lead today? So I have another little diagram here, and it talks about the idea of eustress. So every single day, we all encounter stressors in our lives, and not all of them make us panic and think about running away from this bear, or make us unfocused. Sometimes, if you're like me and you have a paper due the next day, that's the prime amount of stress to get you to really hone in on what you need to do and to perform at your best. So as you can see with this diagram, when we're not stimulated enough, we have distress because we're kind of lackadaisical. We don't really have any motivation to do anything. And then you have this area where you're stimulated, you're motivated, you have drive to get things done. And that's what we call eustress. But then once your stress gets even more, you face what's called burnout, and you have disorganized behavior. And again, you can experience lack of motivation. You can't gather your thoughts. You know, it's hard to ever pay attention to one task at hand. You're constantly overwhelmed and stressed. So normally we're sort of like a sigmoidal curve. And you can think of your baseline going right here through the center. And then you have some good stress, you have some negative stress, good stress, negative stress. But we can always come back to our center. However, when you're extremely stressed, and this was something that I actually learned about in therapy, because I'm going to get to that, Cassandra, for sure. So I've always struggled with burnout because I've always been a yes man. Like anytime someone wanted to give me another task to do, another thing to volunteer with, another responsibility, I was like, yes, I want to. I'm so passionate about this. I love it. So then you say yes, and your stress goes up because I'm only one person, you're only one person, and we only have one way to respond to stress. And then you might get this plateau where you're going through the motions, but you're not really sure how you're getting things done. It doesn't feel great, but you're just meeting the deadlines, and then you crash. This is burnout, as Cassandra put in the group chat. So burnout is that experience when you stressed yourself too long that it's no longer healthy stress. Your body is shutting down to try and protect you, conserve energy, and relax so that you can recharge and work at your best self again. So for me, when I experience burnout, it looks like me staying in bed all day long. I could literally sleep for 24 hours straight and not feel anything. Like I was like, yeah, I was asleep for 10 hours, but literally have been in bed all day long sleeping and still don't feel rested. It looks like me not prioritizing eating. I won't eat all day long, and then it gets to the evening time and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm starving. And then I'll eat a bunch of food because my body is telling me I need to eat. It looks like me ignoring responsibilities. Sometimes people will message me and I'll make a mental list and be like, yep, I have time to check that later. And then I never respond to people's messages. And so here with the I Love Me campaign and the I Love Me curriculum, we often look at it like a traffic light. So green is when when you're working at your best. It's like, you know what? I'm eating 3 meals a day. I'm sleeping 8 hours at night. I drank all my water for today. I did all of my commitments and I have a break at the end of the day to chill out and refresh for tomorrow. And that's what green looks like. Yellow looks like maybe I skipped lunch today. Uh, Maybe I got the things done on my to-do list, but I had to stay up until 1 a.m. to get them done. And now I'm only going to get 5 hours of sleep tonight. Yellow looks like, oh, maybe I didn't get my self-care in today because I had to prioritize the other things on my very long list of to-dos. And so I'm not really taking care of myself anymore. And red is that burnout state where you're not being productive, you're not getting things done, and you're not taking care of your body. So it's so important to recognize those stages. And I encourage you to think about it now. What does burnout look like for you? Are you someone who sleeps more? Are you someone who sleeps less? Are you someone who eats more? Are you someone who eats less? Are you someone who drinks all the caffeine? You have your monster energies, you are going 100 miles a minute and you get things done, but it's not quite up to where you'd want it to be. And remember that when you get there again, that means that you need to let your body relax. You might have to delegate some responsibilities and you might have to let go of some of the things that are really stressing you out and putting too much on your plate. So this is some of the health impacts for COVID-19. So we talked about how our stress response is built for running away from bears. However, how does that look when we're dealing with job loss? We're dealing with transitions, whether you're moving from living on your own into your parents, or maybe your parents' work is moving home, or maybe you're going from in-person class where you really do really well to online learning and now it's independent. You're dealing with maybe living on your own. And again, you're dealing with that independent learning. How do I keep myself motivated? We've also seen that some people's access to being able to see their doctor or willingness to go to the emergency room during COVID when they have um, really important health concerns has decreased because people are afraid. They don't want to catch COVID-19. They see that the healthcare workers are overwhelmed and they don't want to contribute to that. And they were told to stay home, so they're going to stay home. Maybe, there's a telehealth appointment, but getting on the phone makes you really nervous. Signing on to Zoom, maybe you're not quite tech savvy. And all these things can play on your internal monologue and decrease the access to seeing your doctor. Again, as I previously touched on, access for and prioritization of sexual and reproductive health has gone down. Maybe it's not living in Venezuela, maybe it's living here, and you're experiencing, having barriers to getting proper tests done, getting STI tests, getting your birth control in time because of the stress on the system from COVID-19. We're seeing more sedentary lives. People don't have to leave their houses anymore to go to work. I sit in this chair. What are the chances I'm getting up unless I have to use the bathroom on a really busy day? It's not great. And we know that having to move your body every day is one of the biggest contributors to having a healthy lifestyle and decreasing the risk of cardiovascular disease. So I'm just seeing here that some people are identifying what burnout looks for them. Some people's moods change. You can be more irritable. You drink more coffee. You're forgetting to eat. You have difficulty concentrating on your tasks. So if you folks are identifying this for yourselves, why don't we ever take the time to check in with ourselves? You identify these risk factors and you check in about that. And then look at how you can schedule your day or reframe your mind work to getting things done or to delegating your responsibilities so that you feel less stressed and that you can function at your best. We've also seen with COVID-19 that pre-existing health conditions have gotten worse because people's decreased access to nutrition or proper nutrition supports, decreased access to mental health supports that they're comfortable with, decreased access to regular checkups or screening. Again, we see that increased sedentary behavior. Something that I've noticed is that a lot more people are outside. So I'd be interested to see if there's any research done based on how outdoor activity has picked up because I see people walking outside, spending time with their kids, and that's been something that I think has been a positive impact of COVID-19. And so I think it's important to pay attention to those positives as well. And then I'm just going to sort of put this slide up here. Feel free to take a picture or pause if you're watching the live recordings. And this is some of the physical changes that people have seen during the stress of COVID-19, even if you don't have the virus itself. And so I'm just going to skip by that one for the interest of time. And now I'm going to get into a bit more of an anecdote about how my personal experience being a student during COVID-19 and hitting a lot of burnout along the way. So we'll see. So my 2020 looked like I moved out on my own for the first time. I moved into this little apartment by myself, which was great timing there. I was transitioning from a first-year medical student into a second-year medical student, which meant I had 1 year left to learn all this content in a school setting, and then I was going to be out with patients, which was super scary. I got a new cat, which is a new level of responsibility, as well as a support. I started a new relationship, which if anyone knows me is wild and was a big change for me. And I had a lot of the internal struggles. I have struggled with anxious tendencies. I have struggled with depression type symptoms and tendencies, though I've never been formally diagnosed. I have gone to therapy for these types of tendencies. And I also deal a lot with body and self-esteem and issues, which everyone looks at me as being a super confident person, but I am human, and these things weigh on my mind and have a way to alter my self-worth because of the society that I've been brought up in, and how I view myself in the mirror can have a lot of impact. So I had to change my study habits. I was a person who used to study at Starbucks with my best friend. My study environment changed. I had just moved into my apartment in the middle of lockdown in Newfoundland, so I had to study from a couch because I didn't have a desk. I didn't have my office set up. Physical activity was non-existent. I couldn't go to the gym. I'm not someone who likes running. I don't like the cold. So here in Newfoundland, like going outside to exercise wasn't attractive to me. And at the time I was so stressed. I didn't really want to pick that up. And my apartment's small. I couldn't really do a workout class in the space that I had. My nutrition suffered. Fear of going out and grocery shopping when the pandemic was really new was something that was taxing on me. I was living completely on my own for the first time, so I was kind of still learning how to cook for myself. I lived in residence all through undergrad, which was really difficult. I had to challenge myself to communicate with people because, like I said, when I'm stressed, I shut down and I stop responding to people. Socialization was relatively non-existent. I was isolated, living on my own. I found I had no motivation. I was just going through the motions. I wanted to get things done because I was emotionally very sad. And I was struggling a lot, and it felt like a week would 2 weeks would pass, and I thought 1 week would pass. So my time management and just all the landmarks I had around me for time passing were non-existent, and I was constantly battling that fatigue. So that results in a lot of crying. I'm a very tearful person. I cry. I'm very sensitive all the time. Thanks, Sarah. My body was changing. I felt out of control of that, and my self-worth was diminishing because of that. I felt decreased confidence, increased imposter syndrome. I don't know how I got in med school in the first place, let alone how I was supposed to be out with patients in a year, now learning clinical skills from home on my cat. I had a lack of focus. I didn't do great in school last semester. I got through by the skin of my teeth, and that threw me for a loop because I've always been smart. It was part of my identity. And from all that, I experienced a lot of stress. So how did I push through? Thank you. So this is my big sister. So I have two big sisters. This is my oldest sister. She's 10 years older than me. So we always have this joke that's sort of like looking through a mirror glass at each other, because she can see herself 10 years earlier and I can see myself 10 years ahead. And we have a really special bond. So last year, when I was a first year med student before COVID, I was really struggling. The imposter syndrome was there. I felt like I wasn't good enough, and I didn't want to do the things I enjoyed doing anymore. And Megan had enough. She called me and she was like, "What is going on? This is not you. You love life. You're exuberant. You're energetic about everything you do. And you're not that anymore. Like, what is going on?" And so I broke down on the phone with her and I was like, I hate cooking for myself. I'm not confident in the kitchen. I'm eating terribly. My body's changing. I don't have time to go to the gym. I don't have time to do what my school wants me to do. I was like, I'm just in over my head. I'm not good enough. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And she just stopped me in my tracks. And she was like, Janie, she was like, you're in medical school. You're a full-time student. You're in a huge transition period in your life. That is enough. And she put it in perspective to me that doing medical school was enough. And I want to challenge you to say, surviving a pandemic is enough. If all you can do tomorrow is get through another day of lockdown, get through another day of COVID-19, that's enough. Because when you start adding expectations to doing something that is very hard, then you set yourself up for failure. You set yourself up to reaching this idealistic place that does not exist. And you have to practice self compassion. So, in that moment, from this conversation with my sister, I learned that I was already doing enough. I was already contributing. I was already putting the work in, and that I had to let everything else go. Because if I just did that, then I was doing enough. And that's how I learned about self compassion. And my big sister has got me through a lot. And so every day I have a bad day, I'm like, you know what? You survived another day in a pandemic. Start fresh tomorrow. So things that worked were changing my perspective. Again, another big word that Megan always uses with me. She goes, Janie, you just need to gain some perspective. So when I'm having my pity party, which is totally valid because school is hard, my schedule is always changing, nothing's in my control, I have to bring it back and be like, you know what? There's 79 other people in my class who are getting through this. Lean on them. We're all doing this together. Everyone is in a pandemic right now. No one is functioning at 100%. And then it feels a little bit more attainable. I let go of what I could not control. I started being patient with myself and recognizing that I can't hit all the goals that I used to hit before a pandemic started, before med school started, before responsibilities started, before I was dealing with mental health things, and so I learned to listen to my body, my fatigue, and pay respect to that and give myself those breaks. I started to relate to others in my class. I started, giving myself time, prioritizing my body, prioritizing myself. I deserve to eat 3 meals a day. I deserve to go to sleep. I deserve to have a break after an exam. And then I started to gain back some control by advocating for myself and my classmates through my wellness committees, through social media and the injustices that we have all experienced over the last year and have witnessed over the movements of the last year. And that made me feel a lot better. So here is a list. Again, I encourage you just to take a picture of things that may be helpful to you. I really encourage you just to Google suggestions or take one of these and try them a day, because some things aren't going to work for you. I'm not a journal person. I can't sit down and write every single day. It doesn't work for me. But prioritizing my nutrition and my activity really works for me. Scheduling out the hours of my day really works for me. Practicing mindfulness doesn't work so well for me. So take a picture of that. And I think a really big one that we can all learn from here is to take breaks from reading the news and from doing your work. And also, I encourage you to diversify the media that you're taking in. Is all of your media COVID related? Is all of your media advocacy related? Those are heavy topics. You deserve some puppies in your news feed. You deserve, pretty pictures of nature. So do that for yourself and diversify and take control over the media that you're consuming, and follow us at ILM Campaign because there's always positive stuff coming out of the group. So then I looked at what 2020 unexpectedly gave me. So this is sort of like a gratitude example. It gave me the ability and time to explore my province. It made me more independent, having to put together my own furniture. It gave me little Mango. She's my baby, and I can hear her in the other room right now. And she's going to be a life partner. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. It gave me new study techniques and new discipline. It gave me new discipline in the gym as well. Fortunately, in Newfoundland, the gyms have opened up for the majority of the time, and I learned how to move my body in ways that I really enjoyed. It gave me a new perspective on how medicine has to work in a pandemic, how telehealth works, and the importance and advocacy that is to be done in medicine during hard times. Gave me this goofball. That's my partner, Caden, and it really taught me the importance of communication, leaning on someone, and always having someone in your corner. And it gave me new traditions. So we celebrate Christmas together here in my little apartment with Mango. So I gained new appreciation, I gained stillness, which is something I never had in my life, and I gained perspective. So what I learned, you are in charge of your brain and in charge of your responses. I think that's something I learned in therapy as well that I never knew was emotions are not just reflex reactions to your experience. They are things that you can control. So something sad happens, yeah, you feel sad right away and you deserve to recognize those emotions, identify them and give them time, but you also deserve to have some happiness in the sad times. It's not something to be guilty of. It's not being fake, but you can control how you want to emotionally respond to things and how you process and how you move forward. And the same for negative thought processes. We can sit here and say, this is never getting better. Every day is the same. But I challenge you to rewire that thought process in your brain and think about, what am I going to do tomorrow? Am I going to learn a new skill? Am I going to reach out and check in on a classmate that might not be doing so well? What changes can I make within my world, even though it seems the same every day? You can challenge your lack of supports. Why do you have a lack of support? Write your MHAs, your MPs, advocate for better services that are accessible via phone, via internet, via telecommunications. You can challenge your institutions. If your school is being really toxic to your health right now, challenge that. Say, it would help me a lot more if these services were in place, these things are being heard, and these structures were in place. So when we go through unexpected things such as COVID, you got us and we know that you're there for us. Because right now we've learned that this has been a big shock to everyone. And you can also challenge what is accepted as good enough. So like I said earlier, sometimes it seems like we're holding ourselves to a pre-pandemic standard, and sometimes our good enough today is not what we thought would be good enough in 2019, or sometimes current structures that we thought are good enough are not, and we need to challenge them to be better and to better support our communities. So I have one last activity just to show you about how you can reframe your life. So this is like representative of what my life consisted of before COVID and things that gave me value in the traditional sense and in me physically being there. And then COVID happened. I could no longer go to school or have my supports there. I couldn't see my friends and enjoy time with them on the weekend. My family were 4 hours away at least, and over the age of 60, my parents, and I couldn't see them. And all of my extracurriculars had been put on hold because we didn't know how they were going to happen during a pandemic, right when it hit. But then, if you divide your pie chart up a lot more, you're not left with one square, one triangle anymore. You're looking at how you're developing your skills on your own, how you're building your knowledge, how you're communicating with others, checking in on people, giving gifts of time, kindness, help, validating people's feelings, reminding people why they're important to you, practicing patience with what everyone is experiencing, and practicing patience with yourself so that your relationships with others and yourself isn't as strained. A big part of my extracurriculars were advocacy. And when I couldn't physically be there for a lot of these things anymore, I took time to educate myself on my privilege and learn about the barriers that others faced instead of constantly giving the burden of knowledge and education on those who are experiencing them. I supported local. I asked other people what did they need and how I could help. Started listening to my body. I started letting go of things that were causing me stress that I could not change, and I started taking breaks. So if you look at the circle before that had those 5 main sectors, now they're broken up in a lot more. And if one of those was no longer here tomorrow, I had a lot more things to fall back on. And that's another activity we like to do with the I Love Me campaign. So thank you all for listening to me talking. I want to leave you with this. So whenever I think about women who are empowered and empower others, I can't help but think of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I know she's not Canadian or local, but I love her. And she said, for women, it's a radical act to love yourself. And for me, self-love has always meant that I have to be kind to myself and patient in the moments where I want to criticize myself the most. And when you reflect back on the last 12 months, it really has been a marathon for all of us. We challenged ourselves pre-pandemic to build resumes, to maintain high standards, to get the references we needed. And then when all that was changed or taken, and all of that was changed or taken away from us. Remember that living through a pandemic was another stressor, and for many, a full-time mental job. When you're feeling overwhelmed, please remind yourself that you are doing the best you can with what you have in this very moment, and you cannot change COVID-19. However, you can change how you respond to things, your mental processes, and being mindful and present in the moment. Be empowered by this instead of worrying about all the things that you haven't felt in control of over this last year. We're all doing what we can, and that will always be enough. So there's only a few minutes left. Again, I want to thank you all for tuning in and supporting me. I really felt the love through all this. And if you have any words of wisdom you want to share in the chat or any questions, please feel free to put them in there. And follow us on all of our social media. All the information's there. And yeah, if you want to get involved, if you're here in Newfoundland or in Ottawa, just go and email one of those emails and get in touch with us.
Jane, thank you so, so much for sharing with us. As one of our campaign members, you've always been somebody who keeps it real. And that's part of why I was excited to have you join the speaker series today. Thank you so much for keeping it real and sharing really closely and vulnerably what it has been like for you as a student during this pandemic. And I think that, you know, hearing you talk, it's powerful because when we can connect with someone else's lived experience and take parts of that to recognize, oh, that's something that's been happening for me in my mental health, it can really be a good point of reflection for us for growth. But it's also an inspiration to allow us to also take that in and be vulnerable with the people that are in our life so that we can share and get that social support that we deserve. It's been really helpful to hear a little bit more closely from you on what kind of is really going on for women during this pandemic and how they're impacted, especially for students or women who are in a minority category, a person of color, an Indigenous person, or someone who's disabled. I think that's very helpful for us to actually take that lens. And as you said, to research and to educate so that we can do better and learn more. And I think one of the pieces that you spoke to that was really important was talking about being able to do enough just as we are and not trying to think, oh, I've got all this free time because I have to stay home. So what more can I do? And you're speaking to a really important part of self-love and self-worth, which is really fundamentally feeling and believing that we are good enough. So in times of crisis like this, that internal feeling is something we can rely on and stand back towards. Because when we don't have that sense of well-being and self-love, it can be really hard to achieve important goals in our life. So if it's not there, and then there's like this new pressure with the pandemic to do more, it's this just, you know, really melting pyramid of really, really low feelings. And so I really like that you're giving that tip to encourage everybody to start smaller. Just take care of yourself. Just trust yourself and be good to yourself. Because I truly believe that when we can focus on that, the other stuff will come. You know, those goals and those things that we dream of this year, they will come. But we need to do it in time and we need to be gentle with ourselves.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
so, yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna add a couple things. Thank you for those kind words. That means a lot. And I really wanted to echo that, you know, I had a roof over my head. I had the financial means to support myself over this pandemic, and that I wanted to pay tribute to the fact that if you are living a privileged experience, it's okay to feel bad about what you went through this year, but also we had to pay attention and create space for those who living through this pandemic has been really detrimental and really difficult. And I also just wanted to remind people that you don't need someone's permission to listen to those voices in your head and those feelings that you are experiencing. And that is why I try to be so candid when I talk with people and give and be vulnerable, because sometimes we act like we do need permission to be vulnerable. And so this is me giving you all that permission to be super vulnerable. And relating with people is something that has gotten me to where I am today. I firmly don't believe that I would have gotten into medical school had I not been vulnerable and um, helped people relate to what I've been experiencing. And so, give yourself permission to listen to those feelings and to act on them and ask for help.
Mhm. Leaning into that social connection that's so important, and that this pandemic has really showed us how important it is for us to authentically connect and support each other as women.
Mhm.
So if there's any questions for Jane, and you want to stay on a little bit longer, then feel free to ask them in the chat. While we're giving everybody a little bit of time to ask any questions, I'll take care of our closing notes for this evening's talk. And so, of course, we want to extend a thank you to everybody for being with us today and sharing their time. It's wonderful to get to connect all together across Canada. If you want to stay in touch with the campaign or you need anything from us following today's talk, you can email hello@ilmcampaign.com, or you can message us on any of our social media. If you want to make a donation today to the campaign to help us provide free mental health education to more teens and women, you can visit ilmcampaign.com and click on the PayPal donate button. And we've got one more talk today in our speaker series that we've organized, and that's with Shar San Pedro at 7:00 p.m. EST. And so I hope many of you can also hop back on in about an hour and join us again. And that'll be a panel talk with myself and Shar, and we'll be talking about choosing to challenge, investing in ourselves and the world that we live in. Okay, and so I'm not seeing any questions. I'm seeing lots of thank yous in the chat, and I'll leave those with Jane to be able to read. And thank you everybody for sharing as well when we open up the conversation to talk about what your experiences are looking like more closely. It's great to get a little bit of collaboration into this virtual experience. All right, I think that's everything. Jane, do you have any closing thoughts?
I don't think so. I'm just reading through the chat now, and I really appreciate everyone's support. This day is my favorite day of the year, and always brings up so many emotions for me. And I'm glad to see that we're all, relating to one another and creating space for that. So thank you, Cassandra, for organizing this.
Okay. You're welcome, Jane. Thank you everybody for being with us. And that's it for Jane's talk. Thanks again.